Every perfect Hartley family photo had the same routine. 5 minutes before the camera flashed, my stepmother would pull me into a hallway, dig her nails into my arm, and hiss all the ways I was ruining her picture. For 15 years, nobody ever saw that part. They only saw the smiling Christmas cards and the glossy frames on the mantel. Nobody, except the photographer. I thought he was just a man behind a lens. I didn't know he'd been saving everything, and that the day he finally opened his mouth, my entire family story would detonate in public. I'm Elena Hartley, 34 years old, and by all outside appearances, an anchor of stability. My job as a cybersecurity project manager at Northline Systems, a big firm in Minneapolis, requires precision, vigilance, and the ability to spot a threat before it executes. Ironically, these skills were first honed not in a server room, but in a series of brightly lit photography studios, learning to anticipate my stepmother's next move. And here I was, reluctantly standing in the latest one. The studio was ridiculously sleek, all polished concrete and glass. Located in a trendy converted warehouse district downtown, this was the venue for the 10th anniversary family portrait, a celebration not just of my father, Daniel, and my stepmother, Corinne, but of the flawless, expensive brand they had built. The air smelled faintly of fresh varnish and ozone from the powerful studio lights. The main set was minimalist, a crisp, white, seamless background, a couple of expensive-looking velvet props, a chair here, a low stool there, and the cold, unforgiving wash of continuous lighting that promised to expose every pore and every strained smile. My family was, naturally, picture perfect. Daniel and Corinne were coordinating in tailored oatmeal-colored linen, looking wealthy and effortlessly casual. My half-sister, Aubrey, who was 21 and already running her small fashion boutique chain, Aubrey and Company, was in a similar shade, strategically draped to look both expensive and accessible. I was the outlier, and I knew it. I'd chosen a deep navy silk dress, sharp and simple, a deliberate visual resistance to their beige uniformity. I stood slightly apart, closer to the rack of discarded hangers than the velvet chair props. My hands were shoved deep into the pockets of the dress, a habit I'd never quite broken since childhood. It was a physical refusal to offer up my limbs for inspection or control. Corinne, an aging blonde who had meticulously maintained a flawless, sun-kissed look since her late 30s, spotted my posture immediately. Her face tightened with that familiar, minute calculation, the kind that only I was trained to recognize. "Elena, honey, come here. Let me just fix this little thing on your collar." The ritual began. She pulled me away from the bright set and into the narrow, low-lit service hallway, where the changing rooms and a stack of backdrop rolls were kept. It was a space specifically designed to be invisible to the camera, and therefore, the perfect stage for our 15-year drama. The fix lasted about 3 seconds for the actual collar. Then, her demeanor shifted. Corinne didn't need to raise her voice here. The hallway's acoustic tile swallowed sound, making her hissed words incredibly intimate and incredibly painful. Her smile, which had been plastered on for the crew, evaporated, replaced by a razor-sharp frown. She moved close, invading my space, smelling of expensive white floral perfume and something metallic, the scent of pure, focused malice. "You're doing that thing again, Elena, the one where you stand like a frightened doe in headlights. You're going to ruin the light balance with that navy. You always make everything harder, don't you?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, each word a venom drop intended to land precisely in the most vulnerable part of my psyche. "Don't look like a refugee in my picture. This is a celebration of my marriage, not your existential angst." Then came the physical part, the signature move. She didn't hit, she didn't slap. She dug her long, perfectly manicured acrylic nails, today painted a deep blood red, into the soft skin just above my wrist. It was a precise, targeted pressure point, enough to instantly blot out the blood supply and leave a perfect half-moon indentation, but easy to hide in a long sleeve or a pocket. I was 34. I ran multi-million-dollar security projects. I could dismantle her in a legal deposition without blinking. Yet, the old reflex, the trauma response learned as a scared teenager, still kicked in. My heart rate immediately spiked, thudding hard against my ribs like a trapped bird. My muscles tensed, my jaw locked. My adult brain screamed, "Pull your arm away!" But the teenage part of me remained frozen, obedient, waiting for the release. The release came as quickly as the grip. Corinne gave my arm a final, sharp squeeze, and then smoothed down the fabric near my elbow, her public face snapping back on like a mask. "There, now, go give us a genuine smile. Dear, the camera loves a genuine smile." She turned and sailed back toward the light, leaving me leaning against the cold wall, my wrist throbbing, a phantom ache already starting where the skin was now white and numb. Inside the studio, Daniel, my father, was pretending to be deeply engrossed in his phone. Standing strategically near the entrance to the hallway, he had looked up when Corinne and I disappeared and had caught the briefest shadow of movement near the partition. He saw the retreat, the tension, and the return. He knew the ritual better than I did, and just like he had for 15 years, he chose the path of least resistance, sinking his gaze back into the tiny glowing screen, the ultimate depiction of long-term, calculated cowardice. Nothing to see here. Meanwhile, Aubrey, the perfect daughter, was documenting the performance. She held her phone high, face inches from the screen, recording a selfie-style video for her boutique's Instagram story. "Hey guys! Quick behind the scenes for our anniversary shoot. The new fall collection is totally inspired by this neutral palette. Everything just looks so gorgeous when the whole family is here. Celebrating love and stuff. Just waiting for my gorgeous parents to stop being mushy." I was still smoothing my sleeve, trying to hide the damage. As I walked out of the hallway, I must have caught the edge of Aubrey's frame, a dark, unsmiling figure entering the beautiful, bright world. I was the ghost in her perfect social media narrative, the permanent, uneditable blemish on the family brand. The man who was about to capture this latest iteration of the lie was Marcus Reed. He was probably in his late 30s, lean, with perpetually tired eyes that had seen too many forced smiles. He was the owner of Reed Studio, and he had shot nearly every major event for the Hartleys, from Aubrey's first communion to the annual Christmas cards, and several of Corinne's own business headshots. This time, however, something was different. As Corinne had hissed her worst into the hallway, Marcus was adjusting a light stand nearby, near the stack of equipment cases. He froze. He must have caught the tone, the sheer proximity of her voice. He saw me flinch and clutch my wrist instantly as I emerged. He didn't know the exact words, but he knew the routine. He knew, because for 15 years, he had been handed my proof sheets, sometimes with an urgent request from Corinne to just make sure those tiny bruises aren't visible. My daughter is so clumsy. He'd seen the faint, crescent-shaped marks, dismissed them as accidents, then seen them again and again, year after year, always before the flash. Marcus cleared his throat loudly. "All right, folks, let's take a 5-minute break to let the strobe heads cool. Just a quick breather." It was a flimsy excuse. The lights were fine, but it gave him the opening. He followed me toward the corner where I was trying to disappear. He pretended to fuss with the focus on a massive tripod, running his hand along the long metallic lens, a magnificent, silent eye that had borne witness to all our private hells. He edged closer, close enough that I could hear the faint click of his camera turning back on, recording silent video, though I didn't realize it at the time. Close enough to see, in the cold, clinical studio light, the exact moment the red half-moons began to bloom against the pale skin of my wrist, where Corinne's nails had been. It was a line he'd let them cross a dozen times, telling himself it was just a strange family dynamic, just an overbearing stepmother and a moody kid. But seeing the marks appear on the adult skin of a woman who looked capable of running a small military operation, the sheer, sustained audacity of the abuse, something snapped. He couldn't stomach fixing the images this year, smoothing out the physical evidence of their perfect lie. Not anymore. The break ended, and we were back on the white set. Okay, everyone, let's get tight now. Daniel, put your arm around Corinne. Aubrey, maybe lean your head on your dad's shoulder. Cute. Cute. Elena, squeeze in here, right next to your stepmother. Yes, perfect, Marcus directed, his voice professional, but his eyes were fixed on the tension in my shoulders. Corinne, sensing the need to visually reinforce the brand, pressed herself against me, linking her arm through mine. As Marcus prepared to shoot the keyframe, she gave my side a sharp, secret squeeze, a quick, painful reminder under the veil of affection. It was her way of tucking in my fat, a small, public humiliation only I could feel. Click. Marcus took a few frames, and then, just as the tension was perfectly calibrated, he lowered the camera. Wait, Corinne, Daniel, could you two step out for just a minute? I want to try something different. Elena, stay right where you are. The air in the studio went instantly rigid, turning from warm, professional light to deep, cold shock. Corinne's practiced smile stuttered, turning into a brittle, bewildered expression. Just me and Daniel? Darling, the whole point is the family unity. It's the 10th anniversary. Marcus didn't blink. He looked straight at Corinne, then back at me, his lens still aimed. I know what the point is. Corinne, I've been shooting your family for a long time, but I want one shot. Just one. An honest shot. He paused, and his voice, though still outwardly calm, carried an unnerving edge of conviction. A single shot of Elena, the only one here who looks like she's actually living her own life, outside of this backdrop. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Corinne managed a tight, strained laugh. Marcus, you're always such a joker. Daniel stood frozen, awkwardly checking his watch, then his phone again, desperate for a digital distraction from the real drama unfolding. Aubrey, sensing the social media narrative was in danger, shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, the look of a person who fears the background might upstage the star. But Marcus was done joking. He looked at me, and I looked back. In his tired, steady gaze, I saw it, crystal clear. He knew, not just that Corinne was mean, but that this entire operation, the smiles, the clothes, the pictures, was built on a systematic, quiet abuse. He didn't ask me to smile. He didn't ask me to pose. He simply framed me, standing alone against the stark white background, my navy dress a lonely blot of truth in a sea of beige lies. Click, click. The rest of the shoot was a formality. Corinne was cold, Aubrey was silent, and Daniel was a ghost. I got through it on autopilot. I didn't know what Marcus had done, or why, but the act of defiance gave me a small, desperate thrill. Later, as I was gathering my coat, trying to keep my sleeve pulled low over the tender skin of my wrist, Marcus approached me near the exit. He held a small, cream-colored envelope, the kind they usually used for delivering photo prints. He didn't offer a platitude. He just handed me the envelope, his expression neutral, but his eyes heavy with shared history. Take this, Elena. You don't have to open it now. I clutched the envelope, confused. Marcus, I don't understand. What was that earlier? Why did you do that? He leaned in, his voice dropping to the intimate whisper of the service hallway, the voice that only the two of us now truly shared. He gave me a final, chilling sentence that cut through the years of gaslighting and silence, a sentence that confirmed my worst fears and set a path for my future. You're not the only one who remembers every single shoot. Elena, my lens remembers too. 15 years ago, I was 21, newly home for the summer from college, still navigating the awkward space between being a dependent and an adult. The absence of my mother, who had died when I was in high school, was a quiet, constant presence in our suburban Denver home, a presence my father, Daniel, seemed desperately eager to fill. Then Corinne walked in. She arrived on a Tuesday evening, smelling of a high-end department store and carrying a store-bought apple pie that she insisted she'd whipped up herself. Her hair was a bright, meticulous blonde, her smile wide and perfect, the kind of smile you'd see on a real estate agent's billboard. She was the platonic ideal of the perfect stepmom. Daniel introduced her with a nervous, over-rehearsed pride. "Elena, this is Corinne, and Corinne, this is my big girl, Elena." He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing too hard, his eyes pleading for my compliance. "She's a gift, Elena," he murmured later, cornering me in the kitchen after Corinne had gone to bed. "A gift after all these difficult, lonely years. You have to give your old man a chance at happiness, don't you?" That was the moral pressure. The first invisible clamp. Give him a chance. To object to Corinne was to object to Daniel's happiness, to prolong his grief, so I nodded, swallowing my skepticism along with a slice of that fake homemade pie. I was an adult, they said. I was supposed to be mature enough to accept this. The photo shoot started almost immediately, less than 3 months after the wedding. Our first official blended family portrait wasn't in a fancy Minneapolis studio, but a smaller, slightly outdated spot in the town center, smelling of chemicals and stale coffee. "Just for fun," Corinne had declared, but the moment we were in the studio, the fun evaporated. Corinne took one look at my outfit, a simple dark sweater and jeans, and her perfect composure cracked. "Oh, honey, that won't do." She immediately began the work of correction, the first of 1,000 such moments. She tugged at my sweater, complaining about the fit, then wrestled with my hair, dismissing my natural waves as messy. "You know, you really should try to soften up your look, Elena," she murmured, her fingers digging into my arm as she twisted me to face a mirror. Her voice was sweet, patronizing, and utterly crushing. "Try to look a little less like your mother. You're a Hartley now. We want light in these pictures, not shadows." In the narrow changing room, the precursor to all those hallways, the words became sharper, laced with an intimate cruelty that only a family member could inflict. Before the camera even flashed, she had disassembled my confidence, piece by fragile piece. "Stand up straight, shoulders back, don't slouch. You're making me look enormous next to you." Her grip shifted from correcting my posture to applying pressure. She'd grab my inner elbow, pinching the tender skin with her thumb and forefinger, or use her perfectly manicured nails to scrape a sharp line across my wrist. It was a silent, power-driven assault. "Smile, you little ingrate." Her eyes would silently scream, while her mouth whispered, "You need to show the world that you appreciate what your father has done for you. Don't ruin this for us." I was an adult, a college student, but her power was absolute, drawn from Daniel's passive complicity and her own relentless, sharp focus. It wasn't physical abuse designed to leave a mark that social services would see. It was psychological warfare designed to force a photogenic submission. The pain was just enough to make my eyes water, to make my muscles tense, to make my smile feel like a physical contortion of misery. The photographer at that first studio was Marcus Reed. He was probably only in his mid-20s then, freshly out of photography school, nervous, and focused on his technical skills. I remember him adjusting the ancient strobe light, his back to us, pretending not to hear Corinne's low, vicious monologue. He saw the tension, though. He saw my shoulders slump back into place after Corinne released me. He saw my eyes, momentarily glazed over with hurt, snap back to a forced cheerfulness the moment the camera was raised. He'd click the shutter, then look down, silently deleting the frames where my smile was too thin or my eyes betrayed too much, the frames where I looked genuinely miserable. He was the unwitting editor of our family's lie. When those first retouched photos came back, they were flawless. They featured us in that hideous first portrait, Corinne beaming, Daniel looking relieved, and me, smiling wide, looking like I had completely bought into the blended family endless love narrative that Corinne immediately plastered all over her Facebook page and used as the centerpiece of her first Christmas card. It was the visual proof of her success, the image that told the world Daniel was healed, and I was grateful. From then on, the ritual became as regular and reliable as the change of seasons. Every major family milestone demanded a professional shoot. My college graduation, a big birthday party, Daniel threw for Corinne, the annual Thanksgiving gathering. Every single event was preceded by the walk into the hallway, the low, acidic commentary, the sharp dig of the nail, the breath held hostage. My memory of those years became a sensory overlay of smells and sounds. The sticky, sweet scent of hairspray and cheap body glitter from the studios, the constant, low hiss in my ear, the sound of the camera shutter clicking after the pain had just subsided. The control extended beyond the studio. When Aubrey was born a few years later, the picture-taking accelerated. Aubrey was Corinne's perfect prop, blonde, cute, and easily dressed in matching outfits. The pressure on me intensified. Now I was the sullen, dark-haired counterpoint, the before picture in Corinne's life story. As I grew older and moved into my own career, I tried to resist, but the moral blackmail was too effective, delivered by my father. Daniel, my own blood, perfected the art of standing outside the real frame. He developed an almost supernatural timing. Whenever he saw Corinne's subtle signal, a tightening of her lips, a look toward the exit, he would step out. He'd excuse himself to take a very important call or check on the cars. He was never in the room when the verbal violence occurred. He only returned when he was sure the smile was back on my face, letting his relief wash over me like a confirmation that my suffering was worth his peace. He chose to see the resulting smile, not the preceding tears. He chose the lie. Aubrey grew up entirely in this curated light. She understood, intuitively, what the family brand demanded. By the time she was a teenager, she had perfected the act of parroting Corinne's casual cruelty, but with a lighter, sweeter veneer that made it even more insidious. "Elena, you really don't want to wear that sweater for the photo. It makes your shoulders look huge. Mommy says we have to present a unified, sleek image." I was living on a stage where my role was merely to be the necessary, slightly flawed background that Corinne had lovingly polished and reformed. I was the dark shadow she needed to make her own light look brighter. When I was 25, tired, and finally financially stable enough to move into my own small apartment in Minneapolis, I thought I could break the cycle. The family was planning their big Thanksgiving portrait shoot, a themed one, naturally. I called Daniel and told him I had a work obligation that couldn't be rescheduled. I felt a surge of freedom, quickly replaced by a wave of cold dread. Corinne called me 20 minutes later. She didn't whisper this time. She screamed, her voice tearing through the phone line. "How dare you? You are the only thing that complicates my entire aesthetic. You will be here, Elena. You will be here to prove this is a family." Daniel followed up, his voice the familiar, soothing balm of the appeaser. "Just come, honey. Just for an hour. Don't upset Corinne. She's under so much stress with the holidays." I held firm for the first time. I didn't go. Later that evening, scrolling through the misery of my first Thanksgiving spent alone, I saw the photo pop up on Corinne's feed. It was just Corinne, Daniel, and a glowing Aubrey, sitting around a ridiculously enormous, perfect turkey. They looked serene, whole, and completely untroubled by my absence. The caption read, "Grateful for the simple blessings this year. Nothing compares to the love of my two favorite people." I stared at the image for a long time. It was so perfect, so complete, that I realized the true horror. They didn't need me anymore. The brand was so strong, the lie so beautifully constructed, that I was no longer a background to be corrected. I was a problem that could simply be deleted. I didn't even fit into their perfect picture. And that was the moment I understood. The goal was never to fix me. The goal was to use my existence to amplify their own, and if I wasn't available for the ritual of correction, the picture would be even better without me. The thick, cream-colored envelope Marcus gave me felt heavy in my hand, a physical anchor dragging me back to the present. I didn't open it in the studio parking lot. Instead, I drove straight back to my own life, my own space. My apartment, a high-rise condo I'd bought with 7 years of cybersecurity project manager salaries, was minimalist and cold in the best way. The walls were painted a neutral gray, and they were intentionally sparse. I had maybe 3 framed prints, abstract art, nothing personal. There was no mantelpiece cluttered with glossy family portraits. This was my haven, a space meticulously designed to be free of Corinne's need for aesthetic control. It was the stark, grown-up reality that contradicted the backdrop of their life. When I stepped out of my navy dress, I immediately checked my wrist. The skin was still white where her nails had pressed, but the blood was starting to rush back, leaving the faint, predictable half-moon bruises. They were small, almost insignificant, but they felt enormous, confirming that the abuse had been real, not just a psychological phantom. I turned on my laptop, the first place I turned whenever I needed to analyze a threat. The first thing I saw when I opened Instagram was Aubrey's story, and then Corinne's main business page. The new banner for Aubrey and Company wasn't the final, polished 10th anniversary shot. It was a digital preview, a raw, slightly watermarked image Marcus must have sent over for approval. It was the perfect family pose. Daniel proud, Corinne radiant, Aubrey beaming, and me, awkwardly pressed into the side. My forced smile looking like a grimace, but passable enough for the wide shot. The caption talked about family values fueling growth and our CEO, Aubrey, with the support of her tech-savvy sister. A wave of icy clarity washed over me. It wasn't just a commemorative photo, it was a marketing asset. I started digging. I went from the website to Corinne's LinkedIn profile, then to the state business registry. Aubrey and Company had expanded rapidly over the last 2 years, from one boutique to a small regional chain of 5 stores, and buried deep in the public documents, under key personnel and consultants, was my name, Elena Hartley, Chief Brand Consultant. Corinne hadn't just used my face, she had used my established professional credibility, my identity as a senior project manager at a reputable tech firm. A woman who dealt with sensitive, high-level security, was being leveraged to give her small, fluffy fashion brand an air of seriousness, stability, and success. This was no longer about a tight squeeze in a hallway. This was about money, reputation, and fraud. Corinne was using the image of a harmonious, blended family with a successful tech sector daughter to secure loans, sign supplier contracts, and likely qualify for small business tax breaks. The family photo wasn't an ornament, it was collateral. The true scope of the problem landed about an hour later, not as a realization, but as a formal notification. An email from Midwest Regional Bank, a large financial institution I'd never banked with, landed in my secondary spam folder. The subject line was generic, regarding your business account status. The content was anything but. It mentioned an annual review of the Aubrey and Company enterprise account, and my name was listed as a co-guarantor on a commercial line of credit. The number associated with the credit line was shockingly high, somewhere in the mid-6 figures. My hands started shaking. Co-guarantor. I had never spoken to this bank, never applied for a business credit card, and certainly never agreed to back a fashion boutique. The routine psychological violence had metastasized into outright financial danger. It was in the middle of a frantic search for contact information for the bank's legal department that my phone rang. It was Daniel. He didn't ask how the shoot went. He didn't offer a word of apology for Corinne's behavior. His voice was laced with a familiar, manufactured panic. Elena, thank goodness. Look, I just got off the phone with Corinne. She's really upset. It sounds like you saw some of the early contract drafts she was working on for the brand. Please, please, please don't make a big deal about this. She's just trying to keep the family together. The business is the only thing that keeps her happy. The words were a hammer blow. He didn't say. She forged your signature. He didn't say. She is using your identity. He said, don't make a big deal. His desperate plea confirmed everything. He knew more than he let on. He was aware of the financial maneuvering, and his priority was still Corinne's peace over my financial security. He wasn't a passive bystander anymore. He was an active defense mechanism for the fraud. My mind raced back over the years. The photo shoots weren't just about the physical abuse. They were about securing my tacit, documented consent. How many times had Corinne slipped me a random piece of paper at a holiday dinner, saying, "Oh, honey, sign this quick release for the studio. They need it for their files." Or, "Just sign this. It's nothing. Just saying we allow Aubrey to use the family likeness for social media." I'd sign them all, unread, because they were just family papers. Why would I, a cybersecurity expert, suspect that my family would be the biggest threat to my own identity? I looked around my apartment, at the quiet, unadorned walls. For over a decade, I had been an essential element in hundreds of picture frames and promotional materials. Yet I had zero control over the story they told. A story of family harmony and corporate support that was now being used to leverage hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just as I decided to call a lawyer, another email popped up. This one was from Marcus. It was sent to my personal, private email address, the one I had given him years ago for a portfolio reprint, the one Corinne didn't know. The subject was simple. This afternoon. The body was short. "Elena, I'm sorry I intervened in the way I did today. It was unprofessional, but I couldn't watch it anymore. However, there's something you need to know about those contracts you may have signed, or were told you signed. Please check the small envelope I gave you." I tore open the envelope. Inside, there was no photo. There was a single, photocopied piece of paper, a standard image and brand usage release form for Reed Studio. My name was signed at the bottom, granting full perpetual and transferable rights to use her likeness for commercial purposes, including loan collateralization. The date on the paper was from 4 years ago, a time when I vaguely remembered signing something flimsy at a Christmas party, but below my name, in a small, cramped scrawl, was a line of text Corinne had added and initialed. "Elena also authorizes the use of her personal details and professional background for securing necessary corporate financing." I felt sick. The next day, I replied to Marcus. I asked to meet somewhere public, quiet. He suggested a low-key coffee shop off the main street. He arrived carrying not just a laptop bag, but a large, heavy external hard drive and a thick manila folder crammed with documents. We sat in a corner booth, the fluorescent light of the coffee shop feeling ironically bright and honest compared to the softbox lighting of the studio. "Thank you for meeting me. Marcus, what exactly are you holding?" I asked, pointing to the hard drive. He pushed the hard drive and the folder toward me. His face was grim, tired, and deeply apologetic. "Elena, I want to start by saying I should have done this 10 years ago. I was weak. Corinne was a good client, paid well, never missed a bill. But what I saw yesterday, and then what I found when I checked my records against some of your father's recent calls about discreet use of imagery, I realized how deep this goes." He tapped the hard drive. "This is a backup of everything I've ever shot for the Hartley family, every session since 2010. I'm a technical pack rat. I never delete the original files, even when asked to. I have the raw files here, the unedited ones, the ones Corinne told me to delete or fix." He then tapped the thick manila folder. "And this is a collection of contracts, brand releases, and studio waivers I was asked to sign as a witness over the years. And there are some documents you definitely didn't see. Documents I saw because they had a photo attached to them, and I was asked to verify the image." I tried to keep my composure, the professional project manager in me fighting the terrified daughter. "Marcus, I received an email from a bank. My name is on a commercial guarantee for Aubrey's business. I never signed for that." Marcus didn't look surprised. He just opened the manila folder, retrieved a sheaf of stapled papers, and laid them on the table. "It's worse than you think, Elena. I've been involved in the lie longer than just taking the pictures. They didn't just misuse your image. They used your professional identity to fabricate a story for the financial institutions. And in some of those documents, I recognize the signatures, but I can tell you, for a fact, they were not yours." He looked directly at me, confirming my deepest fear. the last sentence delivered with the grim finality of a court judgment. It's not just the photos. Elena, in this hard drive, I have the unedited proof, the things that were never meant to be seen. And in this folder, I have the evidence of signatures that I don't think belong to you. The coffee shop felt like a private screening room as Marcus plugged in his hard drive and turned his laptop screen toward me. I'm showing you the Hartley raw folder first, he said, his voice low, a grim tour guide in my own personal history. These are the files straight off the camera, before any editing, before any color correction, before the Photoshop work Corinne demanded. I leaned in, my cybersecurity training kicking in. I was analyzing data, not emotions. The screen was filled with hundreds of high-resolution image thumbnails, dated over 15 years, Christmas cards, birthdays, graduations. Marcus started clicking through the files from the most recent shoot. The perfect wide-angle family shots flashed by. Then, the sequencing changed. He clicked a file titled Hartley Anniversary 2024-045, CR2. It was an image taken from the side, a slightly awkward angle. It must have been a candid, taken just as the official pose was being set up. In the center, Corinne and I were framed. Her face, caught in a sliver of studio light, was a mask of cold fury. Her lips thin and pressed tight. Her eyes were narrowed, focused entirely on the section of my arm her hand covered. My face was a sudden, blank canvas of fear and submission. My shoulder hiked high, and my eyes darting away from her. She's whispering something in this frame, Marcus explained, his finger hovering over the screen. I cropped these out. I deleted them. I was paid to only show the final smile. He jumped to another image, this one from Aubrey's high school graduation, 6 years ago. In the foreground was Aubrey, diploma in hand, beaming, but slightly out of focus in the background, near a velvet curtain. Corinne was clearly pinching my arm, her mouth an inch from my ear. The red imprint of her nails was visible on my pale skin, even in the slightly blurry background. The sheer volume of evidence was staggering. It wasn't one bad moment. It was a decade and a half of sustained, quiet terrorism. Corinne had weaponized the very act of family documentation. And sometimes, Marcus continued, his tone turning technical again, when I switch from photo to video mode, or when I just set the camera down for a minute, I catch audio. He opened a tiny video clip file. The screen showed only the bottom half of a velvet prop chair and a stack of backdrop paper. The audio, however, was bone-chillingly clear. It was Corinne's voice, low and vicious. If you don't adjust that smile, I swear, I'll tell your father you canceled your flight home. Don't ruin this holiday, you selfish child. The voice shifted immediately, dropping the menace and rising into a sugary, loud tone. Nod, honey, now, smile. We need that perfect family shot. Then my own voice, small and defeated, barely a murmur. Okay, I get it. I understand. It was a recording of my submission, my learned helplessness, preserved in digital amber. I wasn't just told to smile. I was threatened into it, and the camera, that massive, passive eye, had missed nothing. Marcus confessed that Corinne had always been insistent about file deletion. Every single time, she'd remind me to wipe the originals. We don't need the clutter. I told her I keep backups for 10 years in case of client disaster. She just smiled and nodded, believing I meant the retouched versions. Marcus, the meticulous craftsman, had been saving the very evidence that would destroy her artifice. We moved from the digital files to the physical documents in the manila folder. He fanned out a series of image and brand release forms. Each was signed with my name, granting sweeping commercial rights to Aubrey and Company. Look at the signatures, Marcus instructed, pointing out the subtle differences. And look at the dates. My real signature was quick, angular, and efficient, reflecting my professional haste. The signatures on these releases were slightly elongated, almost theatrical, with a different slant on the E in Elena. They looked like a bad forgery attempt, a clumsy imitation of a hurried signature. The dates were the real shock. One release was dated March 15th, 2022. I pulled out my phone and checked my work calendar. I was in Austin, Texas, that day, I said, my voice flat, reading from my flight confirmation. I was giving a keynote presentation at a security conference. I have a badge scan and a hotel bill to prove it. I was 1,500 miles away. Marcus explained his part in the process, his face etched with shame. Corinne would often bring these papers, sometimes weeks later, claiming you were too busy or out of town. She'd say, "Elena signed this. I have her verbal consent. I just need you to witness it for the studio records." She made me feel like it was a benign, necessary marketing formality. He continued, "I signed as the witness. I signed it because I trusted the client, and because in my world, image release forms are just boilerplate. I never imagined they were being used as part of a financial scheme." I suddenly remembered a specific incident, a moment of profound laziness on my part. Wait, one time, maybe 3 years ago, she emailed me a PDF, a photo consent form, and told me to print it, sign it, and email it back. I was stressed. I was on a deadline. I didn't read the fine print. I just signed it and hit send. Marcus shook his head. The days on these contracts, the dates on the financial guarantees from the bank, they often align perfectly with the days you were known to be inaccessible, or the date of a digital signature Corinne could easily manipulate to look like a physical one. He then revealed the financial twist he'd witnessed. Last year, a bank representative called the studio. They were trying to verify that Elena Hartley, chief brand consultant, was, in fact, an active, supporting face of Aubrey & Company. Corinne happened to be here picking up proofs. Marcus paused, rubbing his forehead. "She pulled me into a back office. She told me to tell the representative that you were always here, passionately involved. When I got off the phone, she pressed a thick, white envelope into my hand. It was cash, maybe $2,000. She didn't even try to hide it. She just said, 'A bonus for your loyalty, Marcus.'" The sheer transactional nature of Corinne's morality was breathtaking. She saw every person, every photograph, and every relationship as a purchasable tool. "I felt guilty, Elena," Marcus admitted. "It felt like a bribe. I'd been seeing the bruises, the humiliation, for a decade, and now I was being paid to lie about the professional relationship, too. You were being used as a moral shield for their loans, while in my studio, you were a victim being prepped for the picture." The final document was the biggest punch to the gut. Marcus pulled out a scan of a massive commercial agreement between Aubrey & Company and a regional retail conglomerate, a deal likely worth millions. My name appeared prominently on the signature block, not as a consultant, but as the chief security consultant. Chief security consultant, a position that would require my full time, my license, and would expose me to massive financial liability, a title I had never heard, never agreed to, and certainly never performed the duties for. The signature below it was the same clumsy forgery, authenticated by Daniel's pathetic signature as a witness. I stared at the document. This wasn't just about family drama or a mean stepmother. This was a sophisticated, systematic identity theft operation run from inside my own family. The forced smiles were the cover. The actual $300,000 loan was the crime. I closed the laptop with a decisive thud. The professional calm that had been struggling with the residual terror finally won. "Marcus," I said, my voice clear and firm, taking charge of the meeting, the history, and the future. "I need you to make me 3 full copies of everything on that hard drive and everything in that folder. Every raw image, every video snippet, every contract scan, dated, signed, and certified by you. I need your full, signed statement detailing the bribe and your witnessing of those signatures." I looked down at the materials, the record of my own silence and their escalating fraud. "I'm not just the subject of the photograph anymore. Marcus, I'm going to be the person who controls the lens now." The decision was made. I was no longer the one being shot. I was the one preparing to fire back. I drove back to my apartment with Marcus's hard drive sealed in an anti-static bag and the manila folder secured in my briefcase. This wasn't about the emotional weight of my past anymore. It was a professional threat assessment. The emotional core was still there, a hot knot of betrayal, but now it was surrounded by the cool, hard logic of fraud and legal risk. I spent the next 3 hours in my office, performing my own internal audit. I printed every single contract scan Marcus had provided. I took a red pen and circled every instance of my name, marking them with a simple code: F for forgery, U for unauthorized, T for treachery. I cross-referenced the dates on the fraudulently signed documents with my actual life records. The chief security consultant contract was dated to a week when I was conducting a mandatory 5-day training session in Chicago. My time logs, expense reports for the flight and hotel, and the check-in data from the Northline Systems Corporate Training Center all placed me 500 miles away. The biggest Midwest regional bank loan guarantee, the mid-six-figure one, was signed on a day I'd taken off for a medical procedure, a day I was explicitly confined to my apartment, completely out of contact. The sheer, arrogant brazenness of it stunned me. They hadn't even bothered to pick a day when I was vaguely available. They picked days when I was provably absent, relying entirely on the assumption that I was too passive, too much under Daniel's and Corinne's control, to ever check. I realized I wasn't just dealing with a malicious stepmother. I was dealing with a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of family values. The immediate danger wasn't the past emotional harm, it was the future financial liability. If Aubrey and Company failed, and a fashion chain built on deceit was likely to fail, the banks would come for the co-guarantor. They would come for Elena Hartley, the cybersecurity expert with the clean credit rating. The next morning, I didn't call the police. I called a lawyer. But I bypassed the big, expensive corporate firms. I needed someone who understood the weird, messy intersection of tech identity and small business fraud. I found Rachel Cole, a principal attorney at the Midwest Creative and Tech Legal Center, a nonprofit organization specializing in protecting the rights of creative and tech professionals. Rachel Cole was maybe in her late 30s, dressed in smart, practical clothing, with a sharp, no-nonsense manner. She didn't waste time on small talk. I laid out the whole mess. The raw files, the hallway abuse, the years of coerced photos, and the mountain of forged documents. She listened to the entire story of the 15 years of photo shoots, the physical corrections, and my father's consistent absence. She listened to the way I had internalized the abuse, thinking it was just my bad luck or family drama. When I finished, detailing how Corinne had used the carefully curated image of a supportive, successful daughter to secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, Rachel leaned forward. "Elena, thank you for being so honest about the emotional context. It explains the delay, and it explains why you didn't fight back sooner. But I want you to understand something critical, and I need you to internalize it right now." Her voice was steady and serious. "They didn't just hurt you. They took your professional identity, your most valuable, intangible asset, and they mortgaged it. They used your name, your credibility, and your likeness as collateral. This is no longer about a dysfunctional family or a mean stepmother. This is calculated financial fraud, plain and simple." Her simple, blunt phrasing was liberating. It took the shame out of the narrative. It wasn't my fault for being weak. It was their crime for being ruthless. My first act of defense was to lock down my digital life. I contacted all 3 major credit bureaus, placing a fraud alert on my file. I changed every single bank and brokerage account password. I called my existing credit card companies, canceling the cards I rarely used, and placing strict authorization requirements on the others. I had been protecting the servers of Northline Systems for years. Now, I was protecting myself. In the process of checking my credit report, I found 4 strange recent hard inquiries from various small lending institutions, all connected to commercial real estate in the same district as Aubrey and Company's boutiques. They were clearly testing the waters, trying to see if my name could be leveraged further. Rachel immediately drafted the first necessary legal move. "We need 2 things right away. Elena, first, we send a formal, strongly worded letter to Midwest Regional Bank and every other institution where your name has appeared, demanding the complete unredacted loan file for Aubrey and Company and a full accounting of every document bearing your signature or name. We invoke identity theft statutes. We don't ask, we demand." She paused, making eye contact. "Second, we have Marcus Reed sign a sworn affidavit. He needs to detail the bribery attempt, the request to delete evidence of abuse, and his witnessing of Corinne's claim that she was signing on your behalf. His testimony is the key that turns the emotional evidence, the photos, into legal evidence of coercion and conspiracy." Marcus, true to his word, didn't hesitate. When I asked him to provide a sworn statement, he simply replied, "Tell me where and when. I'd rather lose one greedy client than continue to see you framed as a willing participant in the lies I helped create." His courage gave me a sharp, unexpected boost. The paperwork was filed. The legal process was underway. Now, we entered the tense phase of waiting. But the Hartleys were not going to wait quietly. The moment my bank sent a polite but firm request for full documentation related to the commercial loan guarantee, Daniel called. "Elena, we need to have a nice, fun family dinner. Corinne is just so worried about these bureaucratic forms the bank keeps sending. Let's talk this out. Family first, right? Just one nice meal. No fighting." The coded language was nauseating. Bureaucratic forms meant the loan documents. No fighting meant, sign this internal agreement and drop the legal action. Family first meant, put our comfort above your financial survival. I consulted Rachel. "Go to the dinner, Elena," she advised, "but you are only there to listen. Do not eat or drink anything that might impair your judgment, and do not, under any circumstances, allow them to take another photograph. If they try to corner you, or if they present a document, no matter how small or innocent it looks, your only word is, no, don't justify it, don't explain it. Your job is to simply gather their verbal admissions." She gave me a simple, yet profound, tool. Practice saying the word, Elena. It's the one word you've spent 15 years suppressing. I hung up the phone and walked over to my full-length mirror. Standing in the cold, bright light of my secure apartment, I looked at my reflection, a successful, independent woman in her mid-30s, fully capable of dismantling an entire corporate network. Yet, I had been unable to defeat the ghosts of a hallway. I raised my chin, looked my reflection in the eye, and began to practice. No, the word was unfamiliar, rough on my tongue. It felt wrong, rude, like shattering glass. I repeated it. "No, I don't agree. No, I will not sign that." I kept practicing, turning the simple negation into a solid, unshakable boundary. Tonight, I wasn't going to the dinner as the coerced subject of their family photo. I was going as the security consultant, and my mission was simple: gather intelligence and protect the asset. The asset was me. The Hartley house was a monument to their narrative. It was enormous, custom-built, and every square foot of wall space in the main rooms was devoted to documenting the family's radiant life. I walked through the foyer, past the massive staircase, and into the living room. Every perfect smile in every perfect frame was a version of the same lie, polished, lit, and magnified. I made a point of looking at the pictures as I passed. In all of them, I was either standing slightly behind Aubrey or right on the edge of the frame, the darker-haired, less effusive appendage that proved their generosity. I checked my pocket. My phone was set to record, the screen dark. I was carrying the full weight of Rachel Cole's advice. Listen, collect, and do not sign anything. The dining room table was set with Corinne's best china, the kind that only came out for holidays or when someone important was trying to be placated. Corinne had prepared a slow-cooked brisket, a performance of domesticity she rarely indulged in, designed to create an atmosphere of cozy, inescapable obligation. Dinner started with excruciatingly shallow conversation. Daniel held court, discussing the fluctuating price of lumber and the unusually mild November weather, anything to anchor the evening in banality. Aubrey, sitting across from me, played her part perfectly, She detailed the tremendous pressure of running a multi-million-dollar brand, throwing in vague numbers about inventory and overhead, but without substance. "It's just so hard to find reliable partners," she sighed, directing her comment pointedly at me, the one who was supposed to be the reliable partner. No one mentioned Marcus, the studio, the bank, or the legal letters. It was a flawless piece of family theater. After the main course, when the wine was poured and the facade was fully established, Corinne lowered her voice, softening the edges of her sharp Midwestern accent. The pretense of fun family dinner dissolved. "Okay, Elena, let's talk about these silly misunderstandings," Corinne began, using a tone of weary, affectionate patience that always made my skin crawl. "I know you've been fielding some, bureaucratic forms from that bank. It's all just a big mess of paperwork, honestly." She waved her hand dismissively, as if the potential liability for hundreds of thousands of dollars was equivalent to a misplaced dry cleaning slip. It was just a small administrative procedure to help Aubrey get through a little rough patch with the supply chain. You know how important the business is to her. And really, darling, you have always been the strongest person in this family, the one who can handle the pressure. She was trying to deploy the old gaslighting tactic, paint the massive fraud as a minor misunderstanding, appeal to my ego by calling me the strongest, and then frame my resistance as overreacting. Aubrey immediately jumped into the breach, her eyes suddenly glistening, ready for her close-up. "Elena, you have no idea," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The suppliers are getting so aggressive, and if we can't show the bank that all our paperwork is, aligned, they might freeze our accounts. It's just one little signature. Sis, one little signature is all it would take to save the company and maybe 20 jobs. You're the only one who can help me." She turned the situation into an ethical quandary, placing the fate of the company and its employees squarely on my shoulders. Be rigid and ruin the lives of 20 families. Be pliable and suffer the consequences of fraud. Daniel, who had been silent for what felt like an hour, finally spoke, his voice heavy with the disappointment of a father. He had kept his head down, but now he was forced to step up and deliver the final emotional blow. "Look, Elena, your mother and we struggled, too. I had to pull out every favor and take out huge loans to get you through college and your initial training. I did that for you. Now, it's your turn to help the family back." He had weaponized my tuition, turning his basic parental responsibility into a massive, quantifiable debt I owed him. The ethical pressure was complete. My education was not a gift of love. It was a loan I was now morally bound to repay with my silence and my signature. Corinne, seeing the emotional foundation set, moved in for the kill. She reached under the table and pulled out a thin, crisp folder. "We came up with a very fair arrangement. Elena," she said, her smile returning, smooth and oily. "We can make all of this go away right now if you simply sign these papers, the ones to formally ratify the agreements and confirm your advisory role. We will immediately transfer you a small but meaningful percentage of the shares in Aubrey & Company, a little token, say 2%, and more importantly, no one outside of this room, no lawyers, no bankers, will ever know that this little administrative hiccup ever got messy. We close ranks. We are family." The deal was transparently toxic. A small, meaningless chunk of an increasingly unstable company in exchange for my legal and financial liability. My no was ready. I maintained eye contact. "I appreciate the offer, Corinne, but I will not be signing any documents tonight, or ever again, related to Aubrey & Company." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Corinne's smile didn't disappear, but it contorted, becoming a terrifying, fixed rictus. She immediately switched to offense. "You won't? After everything? After Daniel and I took you in? After he paid for your apartments when you first moved to the city? After the thousands of dollars we spent on your clothing so you didn't look like a charity case at college? I paid your credit card debt when you graduated. Do you remember that? $7,000. We never asked you to pay it back. We just asked for loyalty. She rattled off every kindness, every gesture of basic familial support, listing them like itemized expenses in a ledger, a final, brutal accounting of my debt to them. The tension became unbearable. Corinne was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked around the dining table, her eyes falling on a framed 10x8 family photo from one of the early Christmas shoots, standing prominently near the centerpiece. She snatched the photo frame off the table. "You want to break this, Elena?" she hissed, her voice now barely controlled. She held the frame, perfect and glossy, like a weapon, its glass catching the overhead chandelier light. "You want to tell the world that everything we built here, this love, this success, is a lie? One signature, just one signature, and everything stays perfect." She slammed the frame down on the table, not breaking it, but positioning it directly in front of my seat, blocking my plate, a silent, glossy ultimatum: sign or shatter this. This was my cue. I had listened. I had been offered the bribe. I had heard the gaslighting and the emotional blackmail. Calmly, deliberately, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and set it on the table next to the frame, the red recording indicator flashing briefly before the screen went dark. I looked directly at Corinne, ignoring the fearful, shifting eyes of my father. "Corinne, I didn't come here to talk about loyalty or favors," I said, my voice steady, even, every word weighted with new authority. "I came here to tell you that I have retained legal counsel. My lawyer has sent letters to the bank and to every institution you've contacted, and I am aware of the multiple instances of forgery on legal documents, including the loan guarantees and the chief security consultant contract." Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks as if her internal lights had been cut. "I also have the sworn testimony of Marcus Reed, the photographer, who can confirm that you offered him a cash bribe to mislead the bank, and that he witnessed you signing papers claiming it was on my behalf. And I have the flight and work records that prove I was hundreds of miles away on the dates those documents were signed." I had dropped the legal hammer, and the beautiful, fragile glass dome of their perfect evening shattered completely. Corinne completely lost control. The mask that had held for 15 years disintegrated. She slammed her fists on the table, forgetting the tape recorder, forgetting Daniel, forgetting Aubrey, and forgetting the brisket. "You ungrateful! You know what? Fine. Go ahead and ruin us. I had to. I built this entire brand on your image. You were the only thing that made us look legitimate enough to get the first line of credit. I used you." The words were out, a furious, undeniable confession, captured clearly by the small, silent microphone sitting on the damask tablecloth. Daniel put his head in his hands, his face a picture of utter defeat, realizing the truth, the real truth, had finally been spoken, and worse, it had been recorded. The crisis was now far beyond a simple internal family settlement. I woke up the next morning to an exploding phone. It wasn't the bank. It was social media. Aubrey had launched the first public salvo. Her Instagram post, which quickly went viral among their community, was titled, "Heartbreak Behind the Perfect Photo." The long, tearful post painted a picture of a successful young entrepreneur, struggling to keep her dream alive, being viciously undermined by a cold, unfeeling older half-sister who was trying to leverage a small administrative oversight into a corporate takeover. The post included several glossy, official family photos taken by Marcus, images of me smiling, standing in beautiful clothes, reinforcing the image of an affluent, capable, and therefore malicious antagonist. The comments rolled in like a toxic tide. "Ungrateful! How could she do this to her own family over a piece of paper? Some people just can't stand to see others happy." The court of public opinion immediately sided with the poor, struggling younger sister and the sacrificing stepmother who was always there for her husband and daughters. They were winning the narrative war, leveraging the exact images they had used for financial fraud to commit social fraud. But I wasn't fighting on that battlefield. I was following Rachel Cole's absolute rule: no public response. Everything now went through the official, legal channel. Rachel immediately dispatched formal, certified letters to parties, to Aubrey and Company. The letter asserted that Elena Hartley had never consented to act as a guarantor, security consultant, or co-owner, and demanded an immediate cease and desist on the use of my image for commercial purposes. To the Midwest Regional Bank. The letter was a legal declaration of identity theft and fraud, demanding the preservation of all loan files, particularly those bearing the forged signatures. The legal action worked where my emotional appeals had failed. Within 48 hours, the bank sent official correspondence confirming that, due to the high probability of fraud in the originating documents, the credit line for Aubrey and Company was immediately frozen, and a full internal investigation was underway. The freezing of their capital caused an immediate massive panic in the Hartley camp. Corinne, desperate to re-seize control of the narrative, launched her PR counterattack. She contacted a minor, local digital news outlet known for soft human interest stories. The resulting article, complete with another glossy family photo from 2 years ago, ran with the headline, "Single Mom Entrepreneur Fights Financial Injustice Amidst Vicious Family Dispute." The article portrayed Corinne as the victim of a jealous, professionally successful but emotionally stunted stepdaughter who was using her high-powered lawyer to destroy the livelihood of her sister. She was playing the role of the working mom, the emotional anchor, the hero. Meanwhile, Marcus was being targeted directly. He forwarded me an email from Corinne's lawyer, a large, aggressive firm called Langford and Pierce. The letter was a thinly veiled threat, reminding Marcus of client confidentiality and demanding that he immediately cease and desist from participating in any malicious reinterpretation of client materials. They knew he was cooperating, and they were trying to silence him through legal intimidation. I sent the email straight to Rachel. "They're trying to muzzle him, Elena," Rachel explained during our call. "But Marcus is protected. We are not asking him to break confidentiality to gossip. He is simply responding to a legal request for documentation in a fraud investigation. He is a material witness to the forging of contracts and the attempted bribery. He can claim legal protection under the whistleblower and witness statutes. His sworn affidavit is solid." The multi-front war was exhausting. Every email, every comment, every staged article felt like a fresh wound. But then, an unexpected and crucial piece of information surfaced. A reporter named Ben Carter, an investigative financial journalist for a smaller, but highly respected, local news blog, reached out to me via my Northline Systems work email. His message was professional and concise. "I'm investigating the rapid expansion of Aubrey and Company and multiple claims of late vendor payments and employee wage theft. We have multiple internal sources indicating the company relies heavily on fabricated assets to secure financing. Your story about the family photos and loan guarantees, which has been circulating anonymously in the financial community, is highly relevant. Can you confirm the image usage issue?" I paused. This was the moment of decision. Up until now, the fight had been contained within the legal framework. Corinne and Daniel versus me and my lawyer. Taking the step to speak, even anonymously, to a journalist meant pushing the nuclear button. It meant taking the carefully constructed lie and exposing it to the harsh light of professional scrutiny. The impulse to withdraw, the 15 years of training that told me to be silent and invisible, was powerful. Stay quiet. Protect the family name. Don't make a scene. But then, I thought about the employees mentioned in the email. The people whose wages were being delayed because Corinne was using my non-existent chief security consultant salary as leverage for an unstable line of credit. I thought of Marcus, a decent man who was risking his entire business because I hadn't spoken up. Corinne hadn't just used my image to manipulate a bank. She had used my fabricated family happiness to manipulate the public, the employees, and the suppliers. My silence was her shield. I typed out a careful response to Ben Carter, the reporter, running the draft by Rachel first. She approved the controlled use of information. "Mr. Carter, I cannot confirm my identity or specific legal action, but I can confirm that your investigation into fabricated financial assets and the exploitation of personal image for loan collateral at Aubrey and Company is justified. I encourage you to look at the sourcing and authenticity of every document signed by consultants on the company's organizational chart. Finally, I added a single, powerful anonymous quote that summarized everything. It wasn't about the money, it was about the moral architecture of the fraud. You can have families that build entire companies on fake smiles captured in a photograph, I wrote. The problem isn't the picture itself, it's the unbearable, unforgivable price the person in the picture is forced to pay. I hit send. The sound of the email leaving my outbox felt louder than any gunshot. I had moved the war out of the hallway and onto the front page. The perfect Hartley family was about to be seen, unedited, by everyone. The city's annual Family Business Entrepreneur of the Year event was held at the glittering Magnolia Grand Hotel. Corinne and Aubrey were not just attendees. They were finalists, propelled by Corinne's aggressive and expensive PR campaign. The ballroom was packed with local business elites, bankers, and media, all dressed in formal wear. The event was being live-streamed, amplifying the reach of the eventual winner. Corinne had secured the nomination by relentlessly pushing the narrative of a successful matriarch leading her daughter to entrepreneurial glory, a tale underpinned by the public imagery of perfect familial harmony. The organizers, wanting a visual flourish for the award ceremony, had hired a local studio to create a celebratory slideshow detailing the nominees' journeys. To Corinne's immense satisfaction, they hired Reed Studio, Marcus's small, unassuming company. She saw it as final proof of her control. She had called Marcus 3 times a day in the lead-up, dictating the precise images to be used, only the most polished, professionally retouched shots from the last decade and a half. The final product was supposed to be a glowing testament to the Hartley legacy. But Marcus was no longer taking orders from Corinne. After consulting with Rachel Cole, he agreed to take the job. He had prepared 2 slideshow versions. The first was the one Corinne expected. The second was the truth. Rachel had convinced me to attend. "You need to be there, Elena," she insisted. "Not to perform, not to fight, but to be a silent, physical witness. If this works, you need to see the moment the narrative cracks, and they need to see you watching." I wore a simple black dress, sitting near the back, my expression neutral, blending in with the hundreds of well-wishers and observers. I was an analyst at the edge of the explosion zone, waiting for the fuse to burn down. When the host finally announced the nominees for the Family Business Award, Corinne and Aubrey rose from their table in the front row, already basking in the anticipation. Corinne's smile was the brightest thing in the room, easily outshining the dozens of cameras. "And now," the host boomed, "let's celebrate the journey of our esteemed nominee, Aubrey and Company, and the inspiring family behind the brand." The lights dimmed, and the first slideshow began on the massive screen behind the stage. The music swelled, a generic, feel-good orchestral track. Slide 1. Corinne and Daniel's wedding photo, light and golden. Slide 2. Aubrey as a child, perfect, innocent. Slide 3 to 10. A montage of perfectly posed family Christmas cards, Thanksgiving portraits, and graduation photos, a decade of lies set to saccharine strings. The audience murmured in appreciation of the dream family. Then, the script violently changed. The screen flickered once, a sharp white flash that momentarily blinded the crowd, and the music cut out with a screech. The next image that slammed onto the screen was labeled Hartley Grad Raw 017. It was a high-resolution, unedited RAW file. It showed a tight shot of my face, stark white under the harsh, uncorrected studio light. My eyes were red-rimmed and filled with genuine distress. My mouth pulled into an expression of desperate, contained panic. On my forearm, visible in sharp focus, were the clear, crescent-shaped indentations of Corinne's fingernails. Corinne herself was a blurry figure in the background, her mouth close to my ear, her eyes slits of cold rage. The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute, heavy, and profound. The 500 people in attendance collectively held their breath. The screen immediately jerked again, transitioning away from the still image, and a short video clip, only 10 seconds long, began to play. The audio was no longer a gentle whisper. It was amplified through the main hotel sound system, clear and accusatory. The room heard Corinne's voice, devoid of any warmth, cutting through the silence. "If you ruin this picture, if you don't look grateful, I swear I will not let you set foot in this house again. Understand?" A pause, and then the sudden, sickening shift in tone, louder, directed toward the unseen camera. "Now, smile. Darling, give us that happy family moment." The screen snapped to black again. The orchestral music did not return. The simple text slide appeared, stark white letters on a black background, positioned directly over Corinne's paralyzed form on the floor. "Not all picture-perfect smiles are harmless." Chaos erupted. The low, appreciative murmurs instantly morphed into a frantic, chaotic buzz. The press photographers, who moments ago were shooting Corinne's triumph, were now whipping their cameras around, desperately trying to capture the raw panic on the faces of Corinne, Daniel, and Aubrey. The lights were too bright. The air was too hot. Before anyone could react, before Daniel could move to the stage, Marcus Reed walked out from the wings. He looked small, but impossibly resolute, stepping right up to the microphone. "My name is Marcus Reed," he announced, his voice trembling slightly at first, but gaining strength. "I am the owner of Reed Studio, and for 15 years, I was the unwitting accomplice who edited these lies." He ignored the frantic calls from the side stage. "I am profoundly sorry that I remained silent for so long. I witnessed the psychological and emotional coercion that went into producing every single perfect family photo you just saw. And I cannot stand by now that these manufactured images have been leveraged into a cover story for financial fraud." He pointed at the dark screen. "That image you saw, the unedited truth, was deliberately suppressed to maintain a public front. That facade was then used to secure commercial loans, forging the signatures of family members like Elena Hartley and fabricating her professional role as chief security consultant to gain credibility." The audience was in pandemonium. Bankers were pulling out phones, whispering urgently. The reporters were scribbling furiously. Marcus stepped back, dropping the bombshell that transformed the event from a corporate dispute into a public scandal. "I have provided sworn testimony and the original photographic and documentary evidence of the forgeries and the coercion to legal counsel. The family that claims to value loyalty and honesty built its entire financial structure on the suffering of one woman and a series of documented lies." The camera feeds, still live streaming, were focused entirely on the reaction below the stage. Corinne was frozen, a marble statue of shock, bathed in the residue of the stage lights, her perfect blonde hair suddenly seeming flat and artificial. Her eyes were wide, focused not on Marcus, but on the sudden, terrifying realization that the camera had been turned back on her, unedited, unforgiving. Daniel, my father, slumped in his chair, covering his face with both hands, the embodiment of a coward who had just seen the entire edifice of his comfortable life explode. The relief he had chased for 15 years had finally vanished. Aubrey was paler than marble, muttering a frantic curse under her breath, staring at the stage as if Marcus were an assassin sent to ruin her life. Her victim performance was now running in real time, but this time, the camera was focused on her authentic rage, not her staged tears. And me? I was in the back row. My heart was hammering hard enough to shake my ribs, but my hands were steady. This wasn't just my private vindication. It was the public unveiling of the truth. This was the first time that the pain I had internalized, the submission I had been forced into, was no longer just a feeling. It was a fact, witnessed and acknowledged by a room full of strangers. I hadn't destroyed their image. Marcus had merely shown them the one they had already destroyed themselves. The perfect photo was dead, and the ugly, complicated truth was finally on display. The aftermath of the awards ceremony was immediate and brutal. The anonymous quote, juxtaposed against the live footage of Corinne's shock and Marcus's testimony, hit the local news like a thermal blast. The topic quickly shifted from a simple business dispute to a sensational story about a picture-perfect family built on fraud. The Midwest Regional Bank formally escalated its internal review to a full-scale fraud investigation. Simultaneously, the State Financial Regulatory Board announced they were opening an inquiry into the lending practices and corporate filings of Aubrey & Company. The legal machine was now fully engaged. The proceedings were consolidated into a semi-public hearing, not a full criminal trial yet, but a formal inquiry before a panel of financial regulators and compliance officers, held in a severe wood-paneled conference room downtown. It was high stakes, but lacked the theatricality of a courtroom. It was simply cold, hard accounting. I sat with Rachel Cole at a long table. Across from us were Corinne, Daniel, and their high-powered legal team from Langford and Pierce. Daniel looked defeated. Corinne, however, was in full performance mode. She wore a tailored suit and maintained an expression of saintly forbearance, the misunderstood woman caught in a legal tangle. Her lawyer, a slick man in his 50s, opened with a predictable strategy: distraction and character assassination. He dismissed Marcus's entire presentation as an unprofessional technical glitch and a malicious smear campaign orchestrated by a disgruntled vendor who had been fired. A blatant lie, but one designed to plant doubt. He repeatedly objected to the introduction of any emotional evidence, arguing that the raw photos and audio clips were irrelevant to the signed commercial contracts. Marcus was called to testify first. Under oath, he was unwavering. "I was instructed multiple times to edit images to remove physical marks," he testified, his voice clear and steady. "I was provided with a cash envelope of approximately $2,000 by Ms. Corinne Hartley last year to mislead a bank representative about Ms. Elena Hartley's involvement, and I witnessed Ms. Corinne Hartley present forms with Ms. Elena Hartley's name on them, claiming she had permission to sign as an authorized proxy, which I now believe to be false." He held up a scanned copy of the bribe receipt he had created for his own records, a piece of irrefutable, ugly bookkeeping. Next, Rachel introduced the key documents from the bank's file. The panel reviewed the commercial loan guarantees, the mid-six-figure debt, which bore my name. Then, the final blow, the professional documentation. A certified expert in forensic document examination presented her findings. Her conclusion was definitive. The signatures on all 4 core commercial loan documents, particularly those related to the Chief Security Consultant designation, bear multiple inconsistencies with the validated signature samples of Miss Elena Hartley, leading to the conclusion that they were, in fact, forged. The panel then looked at my sworn affidavit, which included my work time sheets, airline ticket stubs, and hotel receipts. The evidence was presented simply. My alleged signature on a massive loan document appeared on the exact day I was provably 700 miles away. Cornered, Corinne executed her final desperate maneuver. She turned on Daniel. "This is absolutely ludicrous," she exclaimed, turning to my father with a sudden, savage glare. "I handled the creative and the marketing. Daniel handled the financial structuring and told me where to get the forms signed. He was the one who was desperate to keep the money flowing. He told me to manage it. He told me to make it work with the documentation." She was suggesting he had implicitly authorized the use of my name, painting him as the financially irresponsible husband who had pushed her to unethical means. Daniel, who had been sitting in stone-faced silence, collapsed under the pressure. He stammered, attempting to deny Corinne's implication, but he couldn't. He was unable to explain to the panel why he had signed his own name in the witness box right next to my proved forgery on multiple high-risk documents. His pathetic, late attempt to save face only confirmed his years of passive complicity. Finally, it was my turn to address the panel. Rachel had advised me not to engage in emotion, but to tell my story through the lens of my professional expertise. I did not speak as the victimized daughter. I spoke as the cybersecurity expert analyzing a systemic breach. I want the panel to understand that this was not a simple family misunderstanding. I began, my voice steady, my hands resting calmly on the table. This was a methodical manipulation of my image and my professional credibility over 15 years. The small, reportable acts of physical coercion before the camera, the subtle pinching, the verbal threats, were the necessary precursors to the financial fraud. I pointed to the documents. The perfect photo was the attack vector. It was used to create a shield of integrity for Aubrey and Company, so that when the financial documents arrived, the banks would see the happy family and overlook the obvious forgeries and the impossible dates. I was an adult, yet I was systematically groomed to accept the abuse, so that when my name was finally used as collateral for hundreds of thousands of dollars, my silence could be guaranteed. Rachel Cole delivered the closing argument for my side, sharp and decisive. What we have here is not merely a family conflict, it is a calculated scheme of identity exploitation and financial fraud. Utilizing the image and career equity of Ms. Elena Hartley for illicit gain, we respectfully request the panel to declare all contracts bearing Ms. Hartley's name and unverified signatures null and void. Immediately remove her from all financial obligations related to Aubrey and Company and issue a formal protective order prohibiting the future use of her likeness by Corinne Hartley or Aubrey Hartley. The panel deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but the evidence was overwhelming. The combination of the signature forgery, the time-stamped proof of my absence, Marcus's testimony, and Corinne's recorded admissions sealed their fate. The head regulator announced the findings. All commercial contracts bearing unverified signatures of Elena Hartley are hereby declared void ab initio. The lending institutions are prohibited from seeking financial redress from Ms. Hartley. Furthermore, the record indicates a pattern of fraud, and all findings will be formally submitted to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal prosecution against Corinne Hartley and Aubrey Hartley. The final ruling included the permanent injunction. Corinne and Aubrey were legally prohibited from ever using my image, name, or professional title for any commercial purpose again. The perfect photo was not just disgraced, it was legally decommissioned. As the room cleared out, the reporters scrambling for quotes, the lawyers packing their briefcases, I stayed rooted in my seat. Rachel gave my arm a squeeze, a gesture of genuine support, before she stepped away to finalize paperwork. Then, I saw Daniel. He lingered by the doorway, looking small and broken against the vast, dark wood paneling. He slowly walked over to my table, shuffling papers in his hand. He looked at me, and I saw a lifetime of weakness in his eyes. He opened his mouth to say the words he had denied me for 15 years. "I'm so sorry, Elena, I cut him off. Not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating finality. I looked past him, toward the empty wall where the screen had been. You chose to stand outside the real frame for 15 years. Dad, I said. You chose to see the perfect picture, not the person being crushed to create it. You made your choice then, and you're still standing outside the frame now. I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and walked past him, leaving him alone in the center of the cold, silent room. The perfect family was officially over, a few days after the formal hearing, which had resulted in the dissolution of their corporate financial structure and the referral of Corinne and Aubrey's case for criminal review. They appeared on my doorstep. There were no lights, no cameras, no expensive studio gear, just two middle-aged people standing under the harsh afternoon sun, Corinne and Daniel. Corinne was dressed down, her makeup minimal, revealing the deep lines of stress and anxiety around her eyes. Daniel looked like a man who had lost 20 pounds in a week, his posture defeated. This wasn't an ambush for a contract signing. This was a last, desperate attempt at emotional manipulation. I opened the door, but I did not step aside. I stood firm in the threshold, my apartment behind me, the boundary defined. This was my personal frame, and I was the one controlling the lighting and the angle. "Elena, please," Corinne began. her voice hoarse, devoid of its usual practice sweetness. "We just want to talk, just for a few minutes." I waited, silent. Corinne immediately went for the emotional jugular, pulling out the card of illness and remorse. "I haven't slept since that night. I'm having panic attacks. The business is gone. We've lost everything. Elena, your father is sick with worry." She pressed her hands together, looking directly at me. "You've won. You have absolutely everything you wanted. Can you stop now? Can you find it in your heart to forgive us and let us have some peace?" She was trying to turn the consequences of her actions, the collapse of their fraudulent enterprise, into a new moral burden for me to bear. Her suffering was proof of her victimhood, and my refusal to forgive was proof of my coldness. Daniel finally broke his silence, his voice a pathetic whisper. "Elena, I want you to know I didn't know about the big loans. I only knew about a few, small ones. I signed as a witness because Corinne said it was necessary, and I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to start an argument at home." It was the final, pathetic confession of a passive accomplice. His entire defense was built on the premise that avoiding an argument was more important than protecting his daughter's identity and financial future. He wasn't a villain. He was simply a profound failure of nerve and fatherhood. Corinne took a shaky step forward. "Elena, we know we messed up, but we can fix this. If we just tell the lawyers we settled, if we issue a joint statement about a misunderstanding, we could even get a new family photo taken, a real one this time, a picture of us, finally reconciled, moving forward. We can start fresh. We can close this chapter." That was the key. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted a new narrative. She wanted a new, perfect image to replace the shattered old one, a visual clean slate to minimize the legal fallout. She wanted the camera back in her hand. The realization was a moment of profound, bold clarity. The 20 years of abuse flashed before my eyes, the sharp words, the tight squeezes on my arm, the forced smiles, the coerced politeness, the constant, subtle pressure to be her prop. I finally spoke, my voice calm, but radiating authority. "Corinne, I don't need a new photograph to fix anything. The truth is already on the record, and you are wrong about one thing." I held my chin high. "You didn't just use my image to lie. You used pressure, manipulation, and emotional coercion to make me smile for 2 decades. Every time that camera clicked, I was being hit, not with a fist, but with a word, a threat, or the burden of your family's emotional stability." I met her eyes. "I am done being your prop. I am done being the silent background character in your fraud. And I am done being the daughter who is only there to make the picture look good." I laid down the final, definitive boundary. From this day forward, if there is a picture taken of my life, it will be the real one. It will not include either of you, unless it is a court document. I will not be your redemption arc. I will not be the perfect closing shot that saves your reputation." Corinne burst into tears, the genuine, ragged sobs of a woman who had finally lost control. "Then what do you want the family to look like, Elena?" she choked out. "What do you think family is, if not this?" I hesitated, then smiled slightly. I glanced back at the small table in my hallway, where my phone was sitting. It had just buzzed with a notification. It was a message from the Midwest Tech Mentorship Group, a nonprofit where I volunteered, helping veterans transition into tech careers. "Family," I said, turning back to the two of them, "is what you build when you choose who you stand with. It's the people who celebrate your genuine success, not the people who use your name to get loans, and I've already chosen mine." I watched them stand there, 2 ghosts of a life I was now free of. I closed the door, quietly, firmly. The click of the lock was a small, satisfying sound of finality. Maybe an hour later, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Marcus. He looked less stressed, relieved. "Hey, Elena, I brought the certified documents back, the court copies of the affidavit, and the full raw image archive. You should keep them locked up." He handed me a sturdy, encrypted USB drive. He looked around my apartment, then back at me. Listen, I brought something else. He held up a small, professional camera, stripped down to its essentials. It wasn't the massive, imposing studio camera he used for the Hartleys. This one was lightweight, personal. I know what you said about being done with photos, but I've been thinking, you need one. Not an archive, not a lie. Just one image, the first image you choose of yourself, on your own terms, not as a family prop, not as a victim, not as a consultant, just Elena. He looked straight at me, his eyes full of respect. Do you want to take one last photo? The first real one? I looked at the camera, then at Marcus, and finally, I made the decision that closed the door on the past forever. Yes, Marcus, but on one condition. Name it. No retouching. 0. No smoothing out the lines under my eyes. Don't make me look taller. Don't make my smile look bigger. Leave the exhaustion. Leave the hard edges. I want to look exactly like the person who lived through all of that and came out standing. Marcus smiled, a genuine, heartfelt professional smile. Deal. The truth, unedited. I stood in the center of my sunlit living room, relaxed my shoulders, and simply looked at the camera. I didn't try to convey strength or happiness. I just held the gaze. The reality of the moment reflected back. Marcus raised the camera. The gentle, decisive click of the shutter echoed in the room. It wasn't the sound of an accusation or a command. It was the soft, satisfying sound of a final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. The only family picture I needed was the one I finally chose for myself. Thank you so much for listening to Elena's story of truth and redemption. If you found her journey compelling, please let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. Don't forget to register with Lila Revenge Stories. Hit the like button and give this video a hype to help more people hear this critical story.